Guys, it's finally happened. We finally have Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman in the same movie together on the big screen. Just let that sink in. Oh my god. Okay, so Batman v Superman is a Zack Snyder directed sequel to Man of Steel, and it stars the original cast of Man of Steel, while also adding Ben Affleck as Batman, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, and Jeremy Irons as Alfred. Now, before this movie came out, it was getting a lot of negative criticism, and a lot of hate from people who haven't even seen it. I mean, some of the criticisms were from people who've seen it, but most were not. So I tried to go into this movie with an open mind, as I do with all movies. And after watching this movie, I can say that those people were wrong. This is a really good movie, and don't listen to the hate. Go see this movie because it's really good. So let's start with the pros. So first of all, the acting overall was really good. I really liked Ben Affleck as Batman, and I felt like he was one of the best Batman I've seen in a long time. Uh, and he's easily my top three favorite Batman of all time. Because I know there were a lot of people who were mad when he was cast as Batman, and the same thing goes for Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. There was a lot of people who didn't want her to play Wonder Woman at all, and I loved her as Wonder Woman. She's arguably my favorite character. Like, I got Wonder Woman back here. Outside of the Fast and Furious series, I haven't really seen much of Gal Gadot, but after watching Batman v Superman, I hope to see more of her in other movies. I mean, I loved her in Fast and Furious, and I loved her in as Wonder Woman, so I just hope to see more of her in future movies. Henry Cavill as Superman, I liked him in Man of Steel, and I liked him in this movie too. And he's a really good Superman, one of the best we've had in a while. So he was good. Uh, was Jeremy Irons as Alfred? He was good, but I wouldn't say he's like the best Alfred I've seen. Um, he brought the personality and the traits of Alfred, but he didn't really do. He wasn't that good. He didn't stand out to me in my mind. I still think, like, say for example, Michael Caine. I felt like Michael Caine was better as Alfred. Um, Now the person that's been getting a lot of like controversy, or the center of controversy, is Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. Now when he was cast, people, they were against it, like more than they were against Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot. Like, they were against it. Even when the trailers came out, they were against it. And when I walked out of this movie, I didn't like him at all. But the more I thought about it, and the more like I thought about the movie in general, like how his character fit into the movie, I really enjoyed Jesse Eisenberg. So his Lex Luthor is not the typical Lex Luthor that we're used to. This his version of Lex Luthor is like a socially awkward, scheming, and yeah, like a almost, I don't want to say comedic, but like somewhat comedic side of Lex Luthor that we have not seen before. And I actually really enjoyed it, and the way like he was basically pulling the strings between Batman and Superman. And so yeah, it was cool to see his character develop and his plan unfold. So that brings me to the story. I like the story a lot. So the story, it focuses mostly on Batman. I mean, there's multiple story arcs going on in this movie, but the main one seems to focus on Batman and his hatred of Superman. And I like what they did for this movie. They took the one of the criticisms that Man of Steel received, which was all the destruction and death when Superman was fighting Zod in the final battle, and they used that as like the catalyst for Batman's hatred for, well, a lot of people's hatred for Superman. Because in this movie, Superman is a figure of controversy. Some people see him as a godlike figure who's here to save them, while others see him as a possible threat and they don't know whether or not he can be trusted. So a lot of people that don't like him are Batman, because Gotham, as it turns out, was on the border of Metropolis, as we see in the trailer, and a lot of destruction that happened in the final battle happened in Gotham, and Bruce Wayne didn't like that at all. So Bruce Wayne feels that Superman is a potential threat that needs to be taken down, and so does Lex Luthor, but they both have different motives. So I liked Wonder Woman's story arc, even though she wasn't in the movie as much as the other two characters, because well, actually, I can't talk about it without spoiling it, but her story arc actually sort of weaves together the other story arcs, and like in the and into the conclusion that we get in this movie, and I really liked the different story arcs. I think the most important story arc, though, was Lois Lane's, which did not seem important and kind of just thrown in there at first. But as the movie concludes and everything starts weaving together and all, yeah, I felt like her story arc was the most important out of all the ones we had. All the cool Easter eggs, like when it comes to comic book movies, there's obviously lots of Easter eggs towards the comics and like other things, like other films, TV shows, etc. So I really like all the Easter eggs and the cameos they had in the movie. And my favorite actually Easter egg was a cameo by the Flash, and I want to get into detail exactly what the cameo was, but it was unexpected, and I still get chills thinking about that particular scene with the Flash. Um, I liked Doomsday, and I know a lot of people were mad that they showed Doomsday in the trailer for Batman v Superman. But if you think about it, it makes sense because the movie is not called Batman v Superman. It's called Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which means Dawn of Justice as in Justice League, which means Batman and Superman have to put aside their differences, and the only way to do that is for them to fight a villain that would make them unite together. And it wouldn't have made sense if Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman would go up against Lex Luthor. That wouldn't make sense because Lex Luthor doesn't have any powers. He's not that threatening in the movie. So it makes sense for them to bring in someone like Doomsday, who's not too powerful that it's impossible to beat him, but at the same time, he's not too weak that he'll put up somewhat of a fight. And it was cool watching the Trinity to throw down against Doomsday in the final battle. And I love that group shot, like even from the trailer, and just seeing it in the movie where Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman are just standing together, getting ready to face off against Doomsday. I got goosebumps just watching that scene. And I know a lot of people say that Man of Steel is the first movie of the DC cinematic universe, and technically it is, but I feel like this movie did more for the DC cinematic universe than the other one, and I can't wait to see the DC cinematic universe come together the same way the Marvel cinematic universe has. And I can't wait to see the Batman, Wonder Woman, and all the other members of Justice League have their own solo films and eventually come together. So that should be cool to see. So let's get into the cons now because this movie isn't perfect as good as it is. So one of the problems I had with this movie, and it's like a minor problem, was the pacing of the story. So most of the time, the pacing was really good. There weren't any like bumps or slow moments or whatever, but sometimes I felt like certain scenes dragged on for too long, or the pacing just slowed down a bit, and that kind of took away from the movie. Another thing that I didn't like were some forced plot points. So I feel like a lot of things, like some things in the movie, like one or two scenes, there were forced plot points you that were there only to set up future movies, and I felt like I mean, obviously they need to set up their future movies while also telling the story, but I felt like the way they did it, it seemed kind of forced, like a forced. It was just forced. So another thing I had a problem with was the Batman origin story. I don't have a problem with the origin story in particular. It's just that we've seen Batman's origin story so many times. In fact, this is the second origin story in this decade alone for Batman. So it's a typical origin story. Bruce Wayne's walking down the alleyway with his parents. Someone tries to rob them, and his parents get shot and die. I sort of understand why they did it because something that happens in this version of the origin story affects like is one of the biggest climax moments at the end of the film, so it affects the end of the film in a way. but I still felt like we've seen Batman's parents get shot enough times, the same way we've seen his Uncle Ben get shot enough times in Spider Man. So I felt like they could have just thrown away the origin story because people know how he became Batman. And my last problem with this movie was Lois Lane as a damsel in distress. And like, okay, I guess it sort of makes sense because Superman has to save her sometimes, and she can't really protect herself much against someone like Doomsday or Lex Luthor. But she was used as a damsel in distress like a lot of times in the movie. I think 3 or 4 times. And I felt like that kind of degraded her character because despite having no powers or any skills at all, I mean superhero skills, Lois Lane is still a strong like female character and who doesn't really need much saving. But in this time, they basically turned her into a damsel in distress like a lot of times. So I felt like that took away from the movie. But other than those minor things, I felt like this movie was really good. Overall, the acting was great. The story was great. The Easter eggs and watching Trinity throw down against Doomsday was amazing. And I can't wait to see how the DC Cinematic Universe comes together. Um, there were minor problems as I stated before, but overall this movie is really good. I like I said, ignore the hate and just go see this movie and form your own opinion. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't, but that's up to you to decide. I really enjoyed it. So overall, I think I'd give this movie an 8 out of 10. So that's my review of Batman vs. Superman. So if you've seen the movie, comment below what you thought of the movie. No spoilers because not everyone has seen it. And as always, if you like what you see here and you want to see more, just like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.